All right. Hi, folks. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Okta Workflows Online Meetup. My name is Max, and I run education and community for Okta Workflows. And today we have a special guest for this online meetup, Pete Viri. He is a senior IM engineer at FAIR. And the topic that he's going to cover today is how to integrate Okta Workflows and Slack using webhooks and a slash command. Now, a little bit more specifically, we will learn how to trigger a flow from a slash command in Slack, how to build interactions between Slack and a workflows flow, and then also how to customize interactions using the Slack's block kit UI framework. Now, this event is being recorded, and then you can watch the replay right after we end the session. And then I will also publish this video on YouTube. What else? If you can follow us, you can follow the Crowdcast channel. So there is should be in the upper right corner, should be a button or a link to follow us. Then you'll be notified when we go live. We also have upcoming events. So go to the Okta Workflows Crowdcast channel, and I'll put a link in the chat, and then you can register for upcoming events. So for example, every month we now have a getting started event, online meetup, where we cover how to get started with Okta Workflows. We cover fundamentals. So it's a monthly event now. And then so there's one in January. And again, all the past events, they're available on Crowdcast, but also available on YouTube. The last thing, two last things. If you want to tell us where you're coming from, that's always interesting in the chat. And then if there are any future topics you would like us to cover, please let us know. And I think one more thing, and now this is the third thing, is if you have any questions, of course, put them in the chat. There's also a Q&A section. You can also put questions there. I think that's it. Pete, the stage is yours.
Cool, thanks, Max. So hello, everyone. My name is Pete. Welcome to my presentation on integrating Okta workflows and Slack for interactivity using slash commands and buttons. In this session, we'll be going through a demo on how you might create a basic automation between workflows and Slack in order for users and admins to be able to interact with Slack to run custom automations using workflows as a backend. In this talk, we'll go over the following: creating a Slack app, creating a slash command intake flow for Okta workflows, and then lastly, creating a button handler for Okta workflows. So what you will need to achieve all this is the ability to install Slack app to your Slack instance. You may have to be an admin, or you can request an app to be installed. And also super admin for Okta workflows. You need super admin for Okta workflows at the current time. Maybe that'll change in the future, but at the moment, you will need it in order to actually use Okta workflows, or rather build them. So first, let's get started with Slack.
You know, I forgot to say one more thing. I'm sorry, Pete. That you're also an active member of MacAdmins Slack community. I mean, and that's how we met. So if you folks are not members of that MacAdmins Slack, I'm going to put a link right now in the chat. So please join the Slack, and then there are of course many channels, but the one for Okta Workflows is right in the chat message. So it's a very active community. People help each other. So again, if you're working with workflows, you should definitely join the Slack. Sorry, Pete.
Yeah, that's a great call out. The Okta Workflows channel has a lot of people posting every day, just asking questions about Okta Workflows. So if you have any questions about either this presentation or many other questions about Okta Workflows, feel free to just post it there. I'm usually active on there as well. But yeah, continuing on where we left off. So creating a Slack app is your first step. Pretty easy to get to. Just go to your Slack instance, go to Tools and Settings, and then go to Manage Apps. This will bring you to your app section here. You're going to go ahead and hit Build on the upper right, and then create a new app. We don't have a manifest for this, so just go ahead and create an app from scratch. We'll call ours workflows and then select the workspace that we're installing it to. If you're not an admin, you will need approval after you try to install to the workspace under this step here. But we're going to go ahead and go to OAuth and permissions first. We're going to add our bot token scopes. These are scopes that your bot will need in order to write messages to your Slack instance, read messages from your Slack instance, and do other things. At the minimum, we are only going to write or give it the chat write scope for now. And I think one more, commands. This will let our bot use slash commands as well as write messages to our Slack. So after you write the scopes, you need to install it to your workspace. So if you hit install to workspace, this is where you might need an admin to approve for you. If you are an admin, it should just work. So we'll go ahead and allow. And there we go. A token is created. I'm going to copy that token for now. And then we're going to pivot over to workflows. Oh, let me open that real quick. So in workflows, you can create a subfolder for this. I just called mine workflows demo, create a new flow for it. And then we're going to call it, let's call it Slack command. Save all the data in there. And add an event for it, which is going to be the API endpoint trigger. This is basically an incoming webhook where you can invoke commands using a specific URL. And you can secure this with a token or just nothing. In this demo, we'll just do nothing. So hit nothing and then close. We're not going to worry about copying the URL yet because the alias is not created. It will be created after we save the flow though. So let's go ahead and do that. Save. Cool. And pivoting over just for a second, we're going to open another window to create our Slack connection. If you go to connections, hit new connection. Again, we're going to use the API connector connection and choose the custom auth type with the header name of authorization and the header value of bearer and then your token that you've copied from Slack. And I probably should have named this something else. I think this is the original one. Yeah. So I'll delete that original one. And yeah, you should probably name yours something more intuitive, like Slack connection. All right, going back to workflows. 1 second. Let me make sure I got everything here. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and check the endpoint settings here. And now you can see that the alias is populated for the invoke URL. So we're going to go ahead and copy that. And then go back to Slack. Within Slack, there's a slash command section on the left. And you're going to go ahead and create a new command. For this command, this is whatever you want the slash command to be called. Let's just call ours talk to me. The request URL is going to be the invoke URL you just copied. So I'll paste that in. The short description could be whatever. Something descriptive telling users what your app does would be helpful. Talks back. And a usage hint, which tells the user how to actually use the command, whether it's just calling just the command or putting the command and arguments in there. It could be whatever. So just invoke. Right, so this is what it would look like when a user tries to call the command. It'll show the preview of the actual command as well as the usage hint that we put in there. And then the description. So go ahead and save that. Right, so now we have that installed. We're going to go back to workflows real quick. We're going to turn on this flow. and then we'll give you a preview of what it's going to look like when this this flow is actually invoked through Slack. So talk to me. Actually, I think I have my old app still installed from testing. Let me remove that real quick. All right. I think this is still my old one. Hold on. Yeah, this is the old one. Sorry, 1 second. Of course, this doesn't want to work when it's live.
Well, Pete, I think it's a sign it's real. It's a real demo, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure why this is no longer working. It might be because I try to use the same command that I had before. So let's actually try to change that to something else. Let's go and delete this talk to me. We'll create a new command. Let's call it workflows. Let's just call it workflows, nice and easy. Use the same invoke URL. Copy that just in case I don't have it. Test. Save. All right, so now we have a new slash command. And just to be safe, we'll reinstall the app to our workspace. All right. There we go. So now we'll go ahead and go to execution history here so we can see it run. These are my, oh, actually it did work. But I think it was in a weird state since I used the same command as before. So let's try this workflows command. Okay, so this is fine. And we should see another execution here. Yep, there's a third one. Cool. So what happened is the slash command sent a payload over to workflows, which is listed here in the body. Tells you everything about it, the team ID that's came from, the channel name, the user that invoked it. So it has a lot of metadata that you'll find useful for managing these workflows and gating various logic on that workflow. And the reason it errors like this is because Slack never receives a 200 response from it. What we can do is we can go ahead and just do a simple return. There it is. Save that. And if we invoke the flow again, you'll see that there's status code 200. So as long as Slack gets a response of anything that's status code 200, including a return card, which does exactly that, it will not error out in this way. All right, so that's just to give you an idea of what it will look like for you to use the slash command within Slack to trigger something in workflows. Now what we're going to do is start constructing your slash command payload back to Slack. So let's go to Slack block kit builder. So Slack's block kit is very useful for formatting your the messages you're presenting to users, especially if you're doing it for an app. So we'll go to the block kit builder here. Oop, I have to sign in. Don't remember the name of my instance, so give me a sec. Slack workflows demo. Probably better if I just do this from a non-incognito window. One sec. Right. Oops, wrong button. Right, the block kit builder is here. You can check out the references section to reference the whole documentation for block kit builder. But this, sorry, block kit. But the block kit builder is something that you can use to actually play around with and sandbox your messages that you're going to be developing for Slack. So this is the default. It just shows you a couple examples of various blocks. This is a block. This is a block. You can highlight different information in there. You can add buttons like the one that's on the bottom here. I'm going to give you a template that will just be very basic. Let me delete that. So Slack will validate your JSON as well. So if your JSON isn't valid, it actually won't display anything at all. So let me show you an example of that. There is a value payload here. So if you're missing a value entirely, you'll see that there's something wrong with it and you need to put something in there. So let me break this down real quick. So these are the blocks. The first block is just your text block here. Please choose A or B. The next block is the buttons, which are action types. The first button is button A. We call the only important things to call out here for the purpose of this flow are the values, is the value section, which will be your data payload. It can be a JSON, but it will be need to be formatted in a certain way for it to work in workflows, and I'll go over how to do that later. The action ID is also important for being able to gate how you're going to process various buttons, and basically an identifier for which button the user pressed. So you can add as many buttons as you like. In this case, we have 2 buttons. And you'll notice that button A is a bit longer. And the reason for that is because it has an extra confirm section. And this confirm section basically just means that if you click A, it's going to ask if you are you sure you want to do it. So you can add extra confirmations if you have a sensitive button that will do something dangerous or very important that you don't want people to just accidentally click. All right, so now that we have an idea of how to format our blocks, we can take this, go over to the / command workflow, and dump it into a compose card. So the nice thing about the compose card is when you put JSON type data in here, it will convert to an object automatically when you pass it on to certain cards like API post. So we'll go ahead and start with that. Let's see. So you will have to put some kind of value in here. So we'll just leave this as test for now. And we'll do the same for the other one. Test. And then we have to create a list or construct list card. And I'll explain why we have to do that in a second. But you're going to go ahead and drop this item into the construct list card, change the data type to object. So Workflows knows to convert it to an object. And we'll change this output name to attachments just for clarity. It doesn't really matter, but you'll see why in a second we're doing that. And then we're going to do an object set. The objects could be empty, but the path will be attachments. So this is why we called it attachments. You can call it whatever you want, but the path will have to be attachments. And this is how Slack is expecting data to be fed into it. All right, and then use an API postcard. We're going to have the Slack connection that we created earlier, and the output of the object set card will be the body of the message. The URL is going to be slack.com/API/chat post message. This is the API endpoint where that the bot uses to actually post messages onto Slack. Cool. And the request URL, this is normally correct, but what we're going to do instead is we're going to create a new key in the body here. And response URL is what you're going to use. And where did I get response URL? So if you check the execution history, you'll see that in the body, there is a key for response URL. And this is the URL that will feed back into the webhook that you called. All right, so response URL will be here. And make sure I got that right. Yep, that's right. All right, so we'll save that. Let's run it again just to check. And there it is. So now we have our buttons loaded, our message loaded with our buttons. And right now these buttons don't really do anything because we have no logic to handle buttons, which we will cover in the next step. But before we go ahead and do that, let's put some dummy data into our buttons other than just the word test. So what we can do in a real world example for this is create dictionaries that will hold like user data. So let's create a object. Object construct is the card you may want to use for this. You can use compose too. I just find construct a little more concise and clear on what kind of object you're building. So let's do an object called with attributes called name, employee ID, and email. So name will be Pete, employee ID is, let's just say it's 1, and my email will be pete@viri.com. Not a real email, just for the demo. And what we're going to do is we're going to stringify this using the JSON stringify card. There we go. And lastly, we're going to also object set this as the path for blocks 1 elements 0 value. I'll explain what that is in a second, and use the value of that stringify to the output. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're creating another object. We're stringifying it, which means basically turning it into a string of an object, and we're setting that string as a value of the dictionary. The reason we're doing that and not just putting it straight into the value section, where's the value section? Test. There it is. Why we're not putting in the value section there and here is because if you put it in here right away, even if it's stringified, Okta Workflows will convert it for you back into a dictionary because it thinks that's what you want to do, but that's not what you want to do because you want to keep it as a string. And the reason we want to keep it as a string is because Slack will not take dictionaries as a value. It will only take strings. So we're going to go ahead and convert it to a string and kind of pill up the data. And when we parse it later on, we'll go and convert it back into a dictionary. And what blocks 1 element's value is basically saying where we want it under blocks. And since blocks is an array, we want the first element, or the second element rather, because it's 0 indexed. 0 index is the actual please choose A or B, and then the first index are the actual buttons. And we're going to go to the elements array, the first item in the elements array, which is button A, and load the value of that, which is the stringified JSON. A little confusing, but if you play it back, I'm sure you can get the idea. And the second value, we're just going to leave alone because it's not important. Cool. So we construct it, we set the response URL, and we return the flow. By the way, I'll take this moment to show you that if you don't want the status code 200 to show up, what you can actually do is not use the return card, but instead at the beginning of your flow, use an HTTP close card and with a body of text and whatever text you want. So if you do this, use status code 200 still, you will see that if we call the flow again, it'll just say done instead. And then now we have the loaded buttons with A or B. These won't do anything yet since we haven't set interaction, which we do now.
Hey, Pete, I love this. I mean, I guess it's not a trick, but the closing, right? I mean, you need to be aware of it to put the close card.
Yeah, you can use close or you can use return.
Yeah.
Close is cleaner because you can return the text data and it will just say status code 200. Yeah.
But yeah, I remember when I did this for the first time, it's like, yeah, you get the error on Slack, on the Slack side. It's like, oh, what should I do?
Yeah, right? It won't error if you would use either return or close, but you have to use one of them.
Yeah, but what's interesting, sometimes, so it's like you get the error, you don't get the error every time, right? I think you need like 3 seconds, right? Or how many seconds there?
Yeah, I think you get 3 seconds.
3 seconds.
Yeah, so if Okta workflows respond slower for whatever reason, you can still get an error. It doesn't happen very often, but occasionally it will. And if you get an error, that's probably why, because it took longer than 3 seconds to respond.
Yeah.
All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our Slack app, go to interactivity and shortcuts, turn that on. And you'll notice that it wants another request URL. So what we're going to do now is we're running a little short on time. So what I'm going to do is actually, I'll save this. Go to the pre-built flow that I already have for Slack button handler. I'll just move it over to the workflows. So you're gonna create another flow. I called mine Slack button handler. And you're gonna create another API endpoint trigger. Again, copy the invoke URL as before, and you're gonna use that for the request URL here. And then you go ahead and save it. So after you save it, now this is going to be the flow that runs whenever you click any button within Slack. So these 2 buttons already loaded data. So let's check that execution out. These are my old executions, so don't worry about those. I'll hit A right now, do it. Cool, and it ran. So we'll refresh this. Oh, you'll see it did error, but yeah, it's probably because I was testing something. But you can see that the event came in, the payload came in. The payload does come as a stringified JSON, as shown here. So what you're going to do is when you create the API event card, you're going to have a payload key in the body of that of this card. It's not created there by default, so you have to put payload here. It is exactly payload; it can't be anything else. So once you do that, you're going to parse that information, which should come out as the output here. So if we check the execution history, the output of the parse card does have our information. So that's exactly what we want. And as I mentioned before, the value that we stringified as data pilled into the value of the button shows up here as well. Somewhere. Let's see. Or it should have. Let's see. Oh, this is the test value still. Let me see why that is. Let's do it again. Cool. The value is still test. Let's see why that is. Oh, I think I forgot to actually set it correctly. Let's see what data is going out. Yeah, the value is still test, so I did something wrong here. Value. Okay, so I set this, but I never actually put it anywhere. I actually want to put this here. And that should be it. Click it again. To here. All right, so here we go. So now you can see that the value is now that data pilled that we set for the value. And what we're doing in this flow is we are first sending a response to the response URL and just replying blah. What this does is basically consumes the button AB or the original message that was sent and replaces it with a message that you want to put. So in my case, I just put blah. Very similar to the HTTP close card, but instead we're doing it through a post card instead. And you will have to do that for button interactions. For Slack command interactions, you can use HTTP close, but for this one, you'll have to use post. So we're going to use a get multiple card to get the output of the parse card. And two things we care about are the value of it and the action ID. The action ID, again, identifies which button the user pressed, so we can identify that easily. And then the value is what we're interested in, which has the information on the user. So once we parse that information, now you can see that I have this in a nice handy object format, and I can use this data to process whatever I'm going to process in my automations. And that is pretty much it. This last return card is not necessary since we already confirmed the button interaction with the post card. But you can continue to use this response URL in order to update the original message if you like. So what I like to do is delete the actual original message or do something like, your request has been being processed or something, and then later on update the flow with another postcard, this time using the endpoint I mentioned earlier, which is slack.com/API/chat post message. And what this will do is we'll create a new message within the channel telling the status of whatever automation you've run or are going to run. But yeah, hopefully this gives you an idea of how you might implement workflows to work with slash commands and buttons. It's also possible to use interactive modals, such as dropdowns or other elements, but that goes beyond the scope of this actual lecture. Please check out the link doc at the bottom of the screen to see how it's implemented to be able to offboard users at your company using Slack and Okta workflows. But other than that, thanks very much.
Cool, Pete. Thank you so much. This was great. And yeah, folks. So the link there, the green link at the bottom, it's a great guide on how to set this up. I've used it myself. So if you have any questions, again, please put them in chat. I don't see any questions right now, but if you have any in the next, I don't know, 30 seconds. Yeah, thank you for joining us, and Pete, thank you. If you have any ideas for future topics, please let us know. I put my email there, and also again, if you wanna, if you have questions for Pete, please join the MacAdmins Slack, and you can ask questions there, and they're again, it's very active. If it's not Pete, then someone else will definitely help you there. Let me check. I don't see any questions, but cool. Again, the recording will be right after we end this, then tomorrow on YouTube. And thank you, Pete. Thank you again. We should definitely have you again in the future covering a different topic.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Matt. Yeah, like Max said, check out the documentation with on the link on the bottom if you want to get more in-depth information how to actually run these flows in a real-world setting. Otherwise, ping me with any questions. I'm always available on MacAdmins Slack.
Cool. Thank you, and thank you, folks, for joining us today. We'll see you next time.
All right,
Bye.
thanks, everyone. Bye.